They hear the baby before they see him, a thin ribbon of sound that climbs the cabin wall and snaps grown-ups into quiet fury. The CEO in 1A has 3 contracts to land and 0 patients left. He stands to buy silence and meets a wrecked, gentle man in a hoodie who says 4 words that break the aisle open. "I'm a NICU nurse." What follows isn't policy, it's a miracle made of strangers. A hum begins. 100 throats turn into a heartbeat. The baby sleeps. A boardroom shark learns a new math, and somewhere over the Pacific, wealth changes its definition. The crying starts before the wheels even lift off the tarmac, a thin ribbon of sound that at first hides beneath the rattle of overhead bins and the seatbelt chimes and the compressed laughter of strangers sliding into their places and pretending not to judge. But as the plane angles toward the sky, as Manila's constellations of windows sink under cloud and the cabin lights dim to a flattering hush, the ribbon tightens and rises and becomes a whale. It peers over the back of seat 42C, bounces off the bulkhead, and drills into the temples of passengers already praying for silence. Somewhere up front where the cabin widens and the glassware clinks with conspiratorial gentility, a CEO stiffens, clutches his pen, and exhales through his nose like the vent behind an espresso machine. He has 3 contracts tucked to his chest and a meeting at sunrise in Tokyo. He has 2 companies to merge and a board cursing time zones and a mind that has learned how to file people into columns, assets, and noise. He is very good at removing noise. He is less good at babies. The flight attendant in the blue scarf glides toward him with the practiced smile of someone who has solved hundreds of small emergencies with hot towels and patience. "Mr. Navarro," she says softly, "may I bring you a herbal tea? We'll be at cruise altitude soon." He nods without looking up, pen scribbling another note in the margin. Contingency, if Takahashi balks at non-compete. The whale ricochets again, seeking his ear. He presses thumb and forefinger to his eyelids and sees the pivot table of his weak blur. He tells himself it's fine. He tells himself he has built companies through worse. Founders quitting, servers melting, auditors sniffing around like stray dogs. He tells himself the baby will stop. It doesn't. The sound thickens, soaked with air. People shift in their seats, practicing the small socially acceptable rituals of complaint, the sigh behind a mask, the tug at a headphone that isn't actually connected to anything, the quick glance toward the aisle as if the problem might explain itself. The flight attendant with the blue scarf veers to row 42, kneels, and tries everything speakers can try. The mini bottle of water, the winking peekaboo, the consolation of "we'll be there before you know it." The baby, red-cheeked and starfish-fisted, hollers. The mother, no, not a mother. A man in a faded hoodie, bottle tucked into the pocket, dark crescents under his eyes, rocks and whispers and looks wrecked with apology. Up front, the CEO attempts the ancient ritual of will ignoring. He arranges his tray with the neatness of an engineer. He rereads the first line of a paragraph because he doesn't remember reading it the first time. The cry reaches up again, a hand gripping the edge of the world. The pen explodes across his page, a streak like lightning. He shuts his laptop with a crisp sound that is less a solution than a flag planted on an island called enough. This is not rage, he tells himself. It is control. It is insomnia, a week of it and coffee that oils his soul. It is the fact that he has not allowed himself sleep because closing this deal buys 6,000 people another year of work, another decade, and because success has always felt like holding his breath underwater and hoping the pearl is still where it's supposed to be. He unbuckles. He stands. He leaves first class like a general descending into the trenches. He does not mean to glare. That is simply the shape his face has learned while thinking. Halfway down the aisle, a hand touches his elbow. Another flight attendant, older, a crescent of silver hair slicked back, eyes that have memorized people, smiles without showing teeth. "Sir," he murmurs, Turbulence is expected. Please return to your seat. The CEO, Enzo Navarro, whose fifth-grade teacher once told him he spoke like a person already living 2 weeks in the future, inhales. "I need quiet," he says quietly, as if invoking a genie. "I'll pay for quiet. There is no policy for this. There is policy for overbooked seats and emotional support iguanas and Wi-Fi that dies over Guam. There is no policy for the currency of silence and a man whose watch costs something obscene deciding to purchase it." The older attendant tilts his head. His name tag says Carlos. "We'll do what we can," he says, which is a phrase that means we have done everything already. Enzo's gaze leaps from seat back to seat back, seeking the epicenter. It finds the man in the hoodie who flinches as if Enzo's attention is a gust of wind. The baby, fists loud as musicers, wails. Enzo's shoulders draw a map of anger at his ears. "Hey," the man in the hoodie says in a voice that is carefully kind, like a lullaby smoothed with sandpaper. "I'm so sorry. I'm really trying." His ears, it's the pressure. Was there a time when Enzo knew this? How pressure can turn small skulls into cauldrons, how soft bones scream news what they cannot name. He has no children. He has never had time. He tells himself the baby will stop. He tells himself he is not the villain in anyone's story. Maybe he needs a different seat, he says, already reaching for his wallet, as if money is a lever that can move oxygen. The hoodie man nods and then shakes his head at the same time, an animal negotiating ethics. "He needs calm," he whispers, "and he doesn't have a mom to hum to him anymore." The words dart past Enzo's armor and nick something he wasn't guarding. The plane hums. The aisle breathes. Someone coughs into a sleeve. Enzo notices for the first time the folded car seat, unused, beneath the man's knees, the edge of a baby wrap, the snapped strap. He notices the man's hands, wide, nicked along the knuckles, as if this person has been catching things that might otherwise break. "Sir," Carlos says again, "please." Enzo considers retreat. He considers how retreat will taste, a short-term sedative, a long-term bruise. He considers saying something cutting and adult and efficient. He thinks of his own father on a city bus, and the way his father folded at the noise of the world, how he whipped it into obedience with a belt he later flung into the Pasig. He thinks of the boy he once was, who counted his mother's breaths as currency and swore someday he would buy her more. He thinks for a flash that maybe this is not about quiet at all. Maybe it is about control. Maybe it is about something broken and how he glued himself around it. And then the man in the hoodie stands gently, the baby lifted to his chest like a drum he knows how to play. "Excuse me," he says to Carlos, to the blue scarf attendant, to whatever invisible line of authority snakes through the cabin. "Can I use the PA for a second?" The question ripples up the aisle. The attendants blink, startled out of their scripts. The blue scarf shakes her head, begins to say no. All the reasons, policy, safety, precedent, arranging themselves in her mouth like teeth. "Please," the man says, and not to beg, but to move. "I'm a NICU nurse." He shifts the baby so the tiny ear rests on his sternum, the hollow where a heartbeat can be heard. "I'm a single dad. His name is Luca. He lost his mom 3 months ago. I know strange things that help. If you let me lead this cabin for 2 minutes, I will give you silence for the rest of the flight." The crew is trained to evaluate threats. He is not a threat. He is a person whose voice has the particular steadiness of people who monitor lines on machines all night and do not panic when tiny lungs scribe their protests in needles of sound. Blue Scarf glances at Carlos. Carlos glances at the small blinking light near the galley phone, the one that in his career has announced laughter and proposals, and once a rendition of "Happy Birthday" with the acoustic precision of a waterfall. Carlos nods, the smallest tilt, understanding that there are moments when policy bows to humanity. 2 minutes, he says. I'm right here. The man takes the handset like he's making a long-distance call to the past. "Hi," his voice booms, and the cabin freezes, surprised. "Hi there, everyone. I'm Mateo." It's strange to tell you that, but here we are, 30,000 feet over a world that asks a lot from all of us. I'm the guy with the crying baby. If you'll let me, I want to ask for your help. The cabin rearranges itself into an ear. The murmurs collapse. The humming plane becomes his stage. Enzo finds himself leaning against a headrest, contract forgotten, pen cap denting his palm. "I work with newborns," Mateo says, "and I know this sound is a lot. For you and for him. Babies cry for 5 reasons: hungry, sleepy, wet, gassy, and the big one, overwhelmed. Right now it's his ears and the strangeness. I can get him calm, but it works best if we change the air in here for 2 minutes. Not the oxygen," he adds fast. And a scattered laughter fissures the tension, the feeling. He glances at Carlos for permission. Carlos, amazed and somehow a little moved, gestures. Mateo turns the handset away and looks to his rowmates. "I'm going to ask everyone, if you can, to hum with me. Any note, low and steady. Think of the sound of a shower behind a door. Think of a car on a highway with the windows cracked. If humming isn't your thing, you can close your eyes and breathe slow. In for 4, out for 6. The cabin has a heart. Let's give him a heartbeat." There is a fraction of defiance from row 16, an eyebrow, a skeptical smirk, and then something curious happens. An older woman with henna'd hair and a sari tucked lovingly at her waist smiles into her shawl and begins to hum, a note round and sure. Her husband finds the same pitch. A teenager with purple headphones slides one cup off an ear and tries, tentative, then stronger. The businessman with the shiny tie laughs at himself and joins. A toddler copies his mother and makes a B sound. Seat by seat, this accidental choir collects. The sound swells, low and animal, the planet's own lullaby. Mateo closes his eyes. He places his palm on Luca's back and pats a rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. 1, 2, 3, 4. The metronome of reassurance. He angles the baby slightly, the old trick for wind, tucks the tiny legs, murmurs nonsense, sways. The whale catches on the hum like a sleeve on a nail. It snags. It hesitates. It becomes a question. The soft engines of human breath pour into the space, and the question receives its answer. Luca hiccups. He sucks at his lower lip. His fists unstarfish. The sound dwindles to a small sore mule and then to nothing. He sleeps. The hum continues because it is pretty, because it is working, because they have built something together and do not want to dismantle it too quickly. Mateo lifts the handset. "Thank you," he whispers. And now, even people in first class can hear the gratitude thread their way into the word, because fastened seatbelt signs and blatant class divides behave differently when they are transformed into songs. "You can stop. He's okay. You did that." Blue scarf covers her mouth, smiling with her eyes. Carlos leans back against the galley wall and stares at the ceiling as if it has sprouted stars. The crew is speechless, not because there are no words, but because the words are unnecessary, like trying to narrate a sunset while you're still inside it. Enzo exhales a breath that tastes like metal and sleep. He feels something in his chest, something that has been boarded over for years, lift and go looking for light. He moves toward Mateo, because he is a person who moves toward answers, and this man is, suddenly, an answer to a question he didn't know he was asking. "That was," Enzo says, and has to stop, because he is good at precise adjectives, and none of them will do. He tries again. "How did you do that?" Mateo shrugs, sheepish, rocks Luca in small waves. Up close, Enzo can see that he is handsome in the way of people who are often tired and still smile, the skull shaped by kindness, the mouth stained with coffee and trying. "We forget we're animals," Mateo murmurs. "We think babies are broken radios to fix. Mostly they need to know the world will hold them when it's loud." Carlos clears his throat with the relief of someone who has witnessed a tiny miracle and wants to return the plane to its regularly scheduled programming. "Sir," he says to Enzo gently, "if you'll return to your seat." Enzo nods, but his body does not move. He imagines the future rushing at him again, the way it always does, a train of expectations. He imagines this man's future, and for the first time that evening, he wonders if there might be a way for those futures to braid. Do you teach this?" he asks, the words not polished, an unusual thing for him. Mateo laughs under his breath. I take shifts at the hospital. I do a little community class at the barangay hall on Saturdays. It's not much. Honestly, I haven't figured out how to do more. It's just me and..." He looks at Luca, and the air around him softens. "And him." There is a trap door in Enzo's chest that opens in moments like this and drops him into the raw interior of why he does anything. He has made himself into a machine that turns risk into shelter for people he will never meet. He does not know how to love in small units anymore. He leans on the headrest, careful not to jostle the sleeping baby, and surprises himself. "I run a company that builds platforms for education," he says, and the sentence feels brittle in his mouth, like a piece of glass he's not sure he wants to show anyone. "If you wanted to take what you know and put it in a place where a lot of people could find it, I could help, not as charity, as a business, a very good one." Mateo blinks, and in the blink is all the data points of a person who has earned caution. Rent due, bottle prices, hospital cafeteria meals eaten cold, the ferocious need to never barter his son's story for profit. "I'm not selling my kid," he says not unkindly, "and I don't want to be a meme." Enzo shakes his head, aware of how easily his offer will sound like a parachute made of shiny words. "You're not," he says. "You're a teacher. You have a method. We could build something, classes, kits that parents can use when they travel, partnerships with airlines to train crews. There's an app here. There's community. There's..." He stops himself before he says scale, because it will make this not about the sleeping boy with the milk breath. He breathes. There's a way to make this matter bigger than this moment. Mateo studies him. Enzo is used to being read quickly by investors. This is different. This is a nurse reading a monitor and deciding whether to press a code. After a long moment, Mateo's shoulders drop a centimeter, a surrender not to the CEO, but to an idea that makes his eyes warmer. "Can we talk after we land?" he asks. "Yes," Enzo says. And then, because something in him wants to be braver, "I'll move back to your row for the rest of the flight. I can hold the contracts like a second baby." Mateo's laugh is quiet and grateful, a sound that Enzo files away under the strange category of things he may wish to hear again. Carlos, who has watched this exchange like a tennis match, where both players are trying not to hit the ball too hard, steps aside. Passengers who pretended for the last 2 minutes that they were not part of a miracle now give themselves permission to smile. A woman across the aisle wipes her eyes and pretends she has allergies. Somewhere up front, the CEO's herbal tea has gone cold. Enzo slides into 42B, careful, as if the seat might cry as well. The cabin settles into the softer silence of people freshly reminded that they can be kind. The hum of the engines, once a background, now sound like a continuation of the song they just made, a proof they still exist when their mouths are closed. By the time the plane kisses the runway at Haneda, the two men have mapped a plan on napkins, blue pen ink bleeding into recycled fiber. Mateo will send videos. Enzo will send a small team, 2 designers, a producer who used to be a teacher, a community manager whose primary skill is listening, to Mateo's apartment 1 afternoon a week. They will film in the barangay hall, not a studio. They will ask permission before everything. They will build social around the idea of the cabin heart, the hum that calms. They will call it HushWing, because Mateo smiled the biggest at that one, because it sounds less like a product and more like a shared habit. In the jet bridge, a current of passengers pulls them apart, and then together again like magnets deciding the terms. Enzo extends a hand, Matteo takes it. There are 1,000 things each man could say. They settle for the ones that will not do damage if overheard. "Thank you," Enzo says. "Me too," Matteo says. They part because journeys require parting. Enzo resizes his brain and re-enters the world where drivers are waiting with placards and plans. He does the meeting. He wins it in the way he has taught himself to win, with data and patience and the occasional razor. And yet, on the flight back, what he wants to tell his board is that the memory of 100 strangers humming into a baby's dream has rearranged his definition of success. HushWing begins in a little kitchen in Kazan City, where sunlight liquefies above the sink, and a neighbor's rooster keeps lousy time. Matteo props his phone on a stack of cookbooks and talks to a lens as if it's an old friend. He shows how to swaddle with a t-shirt when you forgot the fancy blanket. He shows the 4-7-8 breath for adults whose nervous systems hum like cheap fluorescent lights. He shows how you can turn your own body into furniture for a small person who wants to know where the edges are. This is not the glossy content Enzo's company has produced in the past. It is warmer. It is not perfect. It is better. The first week, one airline reaches out because a passenger tagged them under a video of a toddler on a red-eye turning into a pumpkin and then, miraculously, shrinking back into a boy. The second week, a hospital in Davao uses HushWing in a ward where the mothers have to share beds and the air tastes like antiseptic and fear. The nurses write an email that makes Matteo cry on his stoop. The third week, a mother on a ferry to Bohol hums, a fisherman hums, a conductor hums, and then everyone hums because some lessons do not require brand approval to travel. There are skeptics, people who believe babies are battles to win, who sneer at humming as hippie nonsense, who cannot shake the suspicion that any man who knows this much about calming children must be performing a trick. Matteo learns to live with them. Enzo, who until now has measured feedback in charts and severance packages, discovers the unquantifiable victory of a messenger request at 3:12 a.m. that says simply, "It worked. We're sleeping." They do not become best friends. That is not what the world asks here. They build vocabulary together. They learn each other's silences. Enzo learns the names of things he never planned to know: moral reflex, cluster feeding, sleep regression. Matteo learns things too: wireframes, burn rate, cap table. He will never care about cap tables the way Enzo does, and that is good. They remind each other that the point of a company is not to become bigger, but to become truer. Money comes because the world, despite itself, pays for what it needs. Airlines license HushWing's training. A company that builds carriers wants a co-branded wrap that smells a little like rain. Parents buy kits that include a soft metronome and a booklet written in Matteo's voice, not the gloss of marketing. Enzo refuses a Series A that would crush their edges and asks instead for patience from partners who mistrust anything that takes more than a quarter to mature. Those who cannot give patience leave. Those who can stay, and their absence feels like removing shoes too tight for a long walk. At a small event, the first HushWing gathering, 100 parents stand in a circle in a hall, still decorated with last week's wedding. Matteo teaches them how to hum together. Enzo watches from the back, the way a conductor sometimes watches his orchestra play without him, and tries not to cry at his own arrangement. A baby named Isha falls asleep on her father's chest and has a dream where all the windows stay open and all the doors are safe. Reporters call, some of them with voices that honk even when they're trying not to. They want the juicy angle, a CEO on a plane interrupted by a crying baby, a confrontation, a realization, a company, a bow they can tie with one tweet. Enzo declines, mostly, when one story does run. It names Matteo first. Enzo insists. If he must be mentioned, He wants the adjectives in the right order. Tired, formerly impatient, learning. Months slip like beads on a string. Luca grows into his cheeks. He giggles at the sound of a blender because it sounds like a cabin humming. Matteo's hands remain nicked, but are happier now. Enzo adds an hour to his calendar every morning titled Noisier Kindness, during which he reads the HushWing comments, or holds the door for someone, or looks at a skyline without thinking of commercials. He becomes wealthier, which is an odd word because it sounds heavier. He works to digest it differently. He starts measuring his worth in units of quiet he did not steal but gave. And then, because life adores symmetry, but only if it can smuggle it in, disguised as chaos, Enzo boards another flight. This one is short, a dart from Cebu to Manila, and he is not wearing his expensive watch. He sits in economy on purpose, needs to feel knees and elbows and the choreography of compromise. 8 rows back, a baby begins to cry. The sound, once a threat, now registers in his body as a call. He looks up, but no one stands. No nurse asks for the PA. There is no chorus forming. He glances at the aisle, finds himself rising. He is not Matteo. He does not know how to pat a rhythm like a metronome stitched to a heartbeat. He is a man in a button-down who once thought he could buy silence. He presses the call button. The attendant arrives, a young man with a face that has not yet decided whether it loves people. Enzo smiles in a way that he hopes carries the memory of that night. "Do you mind if I try something?" he asks. "It's called HushWing." The attendant's face flickers from suspicion to recognition to pride. "Oh, sir," he says, "I know HushWing. We trained on it last month." He grins as if he's discovered a celebrity in row 18. "Do you want to lead?" Enzo shakes his head, relieved. "I'll hum from here." He does. The baby quiets. The cabin fills with the simple music of strangers deciding to be a chorus for a minute. The attendant's smile is quiet and new. Enzo feels something in him settle that has not settled in decades. He does not think about deals for the whole descent. When the wheels kiss the runway, people clap because they have not been told in a long time that they are capable of saving something. The attendant leans close as people stand, tugging bags, sorting selves. "We're doing HushWing in all our long hauls by next quarter," he says proudly. Management said the crew in Tokyo reported the best red-eye they've had in years. "That's good," Enzo says, keeping his voice calm, even as an interior joy knocks on his ribs. "That's very good." He checks his phone in the jet bridge. A photo waits. A picture from Matteo of Luca, asleep with a book tented on his belly. The caption says, "He learned to shush the page." Enzo laughs, something huge and stupid and loving. He texts back a picture of the cabin, the face is still soft from humming. "They learned too," he writes. "We all did." In the months that follow, HushWing becomes a quiet revolution, braided through airports and waiting rooms and ferry decks, a rumor of humming that becomes fact, a habit that becomes culture. There are press releases Enzo never reads and bank notifications he skims. There is a dinner he pays for where he watches a group of flight attendants, one with a blue scarf, one with a silver comma of hair, explain to a skeptical manager why they are keepers of something more valuable than brochures. There is, finally, a night when Enzo wakes at 2:17 a.m. with a mind blank of spreadsheets, and instead of reaching for his phone, he hums into the dark for himself and feels his nervous system slip down a small hill into sleep. He still closes deals. He still rises early, speaks in the language of certainty. He still makes errors of grandness, overpromises, underlistens, believes he can drag reality by the scruff because it is what he has always had to do. But he is different now in the way that a room is different after someone opens a window. He knows that there are economies other than money, the economy of attention, the economy of breath, the economy of kindness repeated until it becomes architecture. Years later, when people ask him what wealth is and expect him to say something about freedom or acquisition or multiplying zeros, he tells them about a cabin humming over the Pacific and a nurse with a baby wrapped to his chest asking 100 strangers for 2 minutes of their animal selves. He tells them about a crew made speechless, not by outrage, but by wonder. He tells them that sometimes the richest thing you can do is make a room where a child can fall asleep. He tells them that the ROI on mercy is incalculable and that he has stopped trying to calculate it and started trying to deserve it. And sometimes when flights go bad and babies scream and someone somewhere with a watch thinks they can buy the weather, a person in row 12 closes their eyes and hums. Someone in row 27 joins. The humming wanders forward like a kindness testing doors. A crew member who has carried 1,000 coffees and 100 emergencies lowers a hand to the galley counter and rests there, the same way Carlos did, listening to the air fill with a sound that makes his body believe in something again. The baby quiets. The cabin learns itself. The plane goes on cutting its white line through the night, a silver seed traveling between cities that will never know this happened, a story planted in 100 throats ready to be told again. The morning after that short Cebu flight, Enzo walks into his glass-walled office with the feeling that the walls are thinner than they used to be, that the city's noise is not an enemy anymore, but a language he might finally be learning to speak. His executive assistant, Mika, looks up from her wall of calendars and sees something in his face that doesn't match the last 5 years. She pauses with her hand hovering over the day's printouts. "You slept," she says, as if stating a miracle. "Some," he admits, shrugging off a jacket he would have sworn he needed to do good work. "And I hummed on an airplane." He realizes how absurd that sounds and decides to enjoy it anyway. "Let's shift the 10 a.m. so I can meet with design. I want to talk about the kits." Mika blinks. "The HushWing kits? We're still in pilot." "Then let's fly." They meet in the small conference room, the one with the old factory window he insisted on salvaging when they moved floors because it holds a pleasant flaw in the glass, a ripple that makes the skyline appear to breathe. The product team scatters prototypes, a soft metronome shaped like a river stone, a loop of fabric that tightens and loosens like a hug, a booklet that smells faintly of soy ink and rain. The booklet is written in Mateo's straightforward voice, the sentences clean, unafraid of sounding simple. Enzo runs his palm over the stone and imagines 1,000 palms doing the same. He doesn't talk about market share or channels. He asks about texture. If a dad has hands like Mateo's, knuckles scraped, calluses, does this feel like it belongs to him? Or does it feel like a gadget that will accuse him of failing if it doesn't work in 6 seconds? They edit the kit that day, not for features, but for mercy. The metronome gets a longer battery life because the team remembers night feeds that begin and never end. The loop of fabric gets a wider band because a grandmother with arthritis wrote in that the narrow strap pinched. The booklet keeps the line that says, "If it isn't working, you haven't failed. You found one thing that doesn't soothe your baby. Choose another and be patient with both of you." Meanwhile, the airline partnership inches forward with the bureaucratic pace of a large animal discovering a new gait. Training coordinators schedule sessions. Crew members practice explaining humming without making it sound silly. One skeptical instructor, a man with a tight jaw who has learned to control disasters by naming their tiny parts, asks for studies. Mateo sends what he has, research on co-regulation, on the polyvagal theory, on the way low-frequency sound stroking our ears tells our nervous system the tiger is gone for now. The instructor reads, insists on a controlled trial on 2 red eyes, one with HushWing training and a PA moment if needed, one without. He becomes a convert the 3rd time he watches a cabin hum itself into dignity. There are other calls. A hospital administrator from a maternity ward where the partition curtains have been repaired so many times they are more thread than original cloth. a ferry company whose routes stitch together towns with more goats than taxis, a psychiatrist who runs a clinic for parents in the aftershock of postpartum. They want to talk about pricing, which makes Enzo's old engine rev by muscle memory. He keeps it slow. We'll price to sustain the work, he says, not to wring it. Not everyone loves this new math. At the next board meeting, a man in a blazer the color of old nickel clears his throat while the oat milk lattes steam on a tray. His name is Leandro, a partner at a growth fund that entered 2 years ago when Enzo's last platform lit up the charts, and he believes everything valuable should be forced to run faster until it either wins or breaks, and that broken things can be sold for parts. Enzo, he says, polite enough that the knife hides in the napkin, I appreciate the humanistic angle here. The narrative has virality. But I have concerns. Your pilot revenue is anemic. The licensing terms are conservative to the point of aesthetic. And this focus on training, soft, unscalable, people-dependent. You built a software company that crossed 8 figures ARR. This is a craft store. Mika watches tension coil in Enzo's shoulders like rope and hopes he chooses a different tug-of-war than he used to. He does. He keeps his voice level. We're building an ecosystem, he says, and surprises himself by not hating the word. Training is the core. Kits and content radiate from there. If we get the training wrong, nothing else should be right. Leandro smiles the way people smile when they've spotted a lever. The market does not reward patience unless it is a story told after a success. Mika's throat tightens. Enzo thinks absurdly of the hum. He imagines the room as a cabin. He imagines all these adults with their practiced scowls as babies whose ears hurt. Leandro, he says softly, we're not selling an object. We're selling the reduction of harm at scale. We're selling fewer mid-air altercations and more people who land with a nervous system that didn't get shredded. We're selling the ease of a parent who won't be humiliated into rage. If we clip this to fit quarterly optics, we'll kill the thing that makes it work. Across the table, another board member, Amara, who built a chain of clinics and learned to talk to money without letting it speak through her, tips her pen at him. I want 5-year forecasts that include non-monetary outcomes, she says, and I want to see an independent ethics board assigned to HushWing. If this is what you say it is, it will pull crowds, and crowds attract opportunists. Put an early warning system in the org chart. Enzo nods, relief slicking his spine. Leandro makes a note he hopes looks neutral and is not. That night, Enzo eats noodles at a small table with Matteo and Luca. The boy is at that age where spoons are more like ideas than tools, and the floor beneath his chair looks like a noodle museum. Enzo holds a napkin under the drift and tries not to smile too obviously at the chaos. Had our first humming complaint, Matteo says, as if reporting weather. Man in 15A on the Osaka flight said the humming sounded like a cult, and he found it intrusive. Crew debriefed him at the gate. He said he doesn't like being told what to do. What did the crew say? Enzo twirls his noodles, waiting. They said, we do not tell people to hum, we invite. They offered earplugs, he took them. 2 hours later he wrote HushWing to apologize because he fell asleep for the first time on a plane in a decade. Enzo barks out a small laugh he's not used to hearing in his own throat. We need a policy page for institutional partners, he says. A simple one, not legalese. How to invite without pressuring. How to explain to people who don't want to participate that this will still benefit them. How to handle the jackass who wants to record a meltdown for clicks. Matteo's eyes cloud. We had one of those at the barangay hall last week, he says. A teenager kept filming a mother who couldn't get her baby to latch. She was crying. The boy thought it was funny. He scoops Luca into the crook of his elbow without thinking, the way some people tuck laughter. We are not content unless we consent. I told him that. He left. She stayed. We learned together. They build the policy page on a Sunday afternoon beside a fan that squeaks every third rotation. It is a document made of 3 sentences translated into Tagalog, Bisaya, Ilocano English, and the universal shorthand of pictures. It says, "We invite, never compel. We ask before we record always. We explain why we hum, and we accept that some people will only understand after they feel it." Enzo adds a 4th line that he deletes and then adds back, "We protect the dignity of the crying person first." The crying person, of course, is not always a baby. The first time HushWing is used during a panic attack mid-flight, it is an older man with a banker's haircut and the raw voice of someone who doesn't know what's happening to his body. He stands, breath stuttering, grabs for an overhead bin like it might open into a meadow. The crew moves in with the rehearsed grace that has become their muscle memory. One attendant at his eye level, one at his elbow, one at the galley phone. The attendant at eye level hums, low as a cat purr. Another passenger, a woman with a scar on her wrist that she covers with a bracelet of plastic beads, hums, too. The banker sits. The humming widens. His breath, like a horse learning pavement, manages a new rhythm. He cries into his hands and is not ashamed. Because what holds him is not pity, but sound. After landing, he writes in a small email full of capital letters and an apology for not knowing how to be vulnerable, that he thought he was dying, and that for the first time in a long time, a room told him he was not a burden for needing help. Not everything is tender. When a copycat app called Hush Babies appears with a logo suspiciously similar to HushWing's and a series of videos that turns Mateo's methods into stunts, challenge vids titled "Shush in 60 Seconds," Enzo's legal team sends the appropriate letters. The startup behind it posts a thread accusing HushWing of gatekeeping soothing, which is an odd sentence that gains traction among people who think all knowledge should be free and no labor should be paid, and that community is a thing that happens to other people. The thread is furious for 48 hours, and then, when Hush Baby pushes an update that asks for microphone access and location and an unnecessary list of contact permissions, the fury turns. "Let them burn themselves," Amara texts. "They don't hum, they hype." Enzo does not clap. He feels a familiar edge of righteousness in his chest and turns it into a call to the team. Double down on consent. Double down on simplicity. Double down on the fact that our tool is a human being making a sound, not an app making a beep. In the middle of a tinder-dry week, meetings stacked like Jenga, paperwork that smells like rain that never arrives, Enzo's phone buzzes with Mateo's name and an image that sears everything else out of the frame. Luca's forehead is hot in a hospital light. IV tape peeks from beneath a tiny arm. Mateo's caption is almost unreadable because it was typed with shaking hands. "High fever, they think it's viral. We're admitted overnight just in case." Enzo freezes, the world narrowing to a beeping monitor that he can hear even through a picture. Suddenly, the language that has carried him his whole adult life, metrics, margins, the confident fall of a solution into a problem socket, becomes cheap plastic. He is in his car before he realizes he told Mika to cancel the rest of the day. He texts once, "I'm coming if you want me there." Mateo replies, "Yes." The pediatric ward smells like everything comforting colliding with everything terrifying, talcum and bleach, cartoons and the thrum of machines. Enzo finds them in a corner room where someone has painted fish on the wall in colors that are almost but not quite ocean. Luca dozes with a dampness in his eyelashes that makes Enzo want to find time and ask it to be gentler. Mateo is slumped in a chair with his head tilted toward the window, the posture of a person who has been holding things together for too long and just set them down. When he looks up, there is a flicker in his face between relief and the reflex to say, "You didn't have to." He doesn't say either. He stands. They hug in the awkward male way, two people who were not handed easy scripts for this kind of comfort hug, one arm unsure, the other overeager. And then the awkwardness evaporates because some rooms write the scripts themselves. "How is he?" Enzo asks, voice long on breath, short on air. "Better." Matteo runs a hand through his hair, leaves it askew. Fever broke. They think it was just a climbing virus, spike, crash. But when it was spiking, he was not himself. He looked through me. I hated it. I know that happens. I know it's a thing. But the knowing didn't help. Enzo sits. The chair is the kind designed to be endured rather than enjoyed, and he understands suddenly why he is here, not to fix, but to witness. He doesn't know how to do only that. He tries. "Do you want coffee?" he asks. "Water? A sandwich that claims to be chicken but is probably philosophical tofu?" Matteo laughs, a small sound that makes the machine seem less in charge. "Water." Enzo returns with a bottle and a banana and a packet of crackers because he cannot approach a problem without layering redundancies. They eat with the solemnity of people who have talked for hours and arrived at the only 3 correct words: "We are here." When Luca wakes and whimpers, Matteo leans in with the hum they've taught the world, a note so low it might be the floor itself singing. Enzo hums too, under his breath, surprised at how easily it finds him now. "Do you remember your mother's lullabies?" Matteo asks suddenly, his voice part curiosity, part offering. Enzo shakes his head, a small grief in the gesture. "We didn't do lullabies. We did prayers and television, but she had a way of stirring soup that made a sound, a kind of circle against the pot. I think that was our lullaby. Circles." "Mine sang nonsense," Matteo says, "words that don't translate. Sometimes nonsense is better." The fever breaks further. The monitor's numbers soften. Matteo closes his eyes and sleeps in disjointed batches. Enzo watches the hallway where nurses glide and families hover at thresholds like pilgrims, unsure how close they're allowed to get to the altar. He feels, absurdly and beautifully, small, not diminished, sized properly against the landscape of what matters. When Luca is discharged, Matteo insists on sending a video to the HushWing community. He sets the phone on the dashboard of his old sedan, wipes his face, and speaks. "Last night, I was the parent in the ward. I forgot half of what I teach when it's your own child. That's normal. You don't have to be an expert to be enough. We're learning to be kind to ourselves in this room. I hope you are too." The comments rush in from 1,000 kitchens and couches and airport chairs. People confess to panic and to humility. Someone writes, "My twins were in incubators. I hummed to plastic. I needed this." Another says, "I'm not a parent. I used HushWing on my own heart after a fight. It worked. Thank you for letting this be for more than babies." Matteo reads until he cries into a towel on his couch, and then he stops reading and goes outside with Luca to look at a piece of sky. HushWing's cultural seep continues. A school in Iloilo uses it in a classroom where a teacher needs to bring the volume down without turning learning into a police state. A train line in Japan experiments with quiet cars that are not enforced by shame, but opened by an invitation to hum for the first minute of every hour. A courthouse clerk suggests learning it for jury rooms where the stakes make air brittle. Someone in a refugee camp records a voice note of a tent full of kids and their mothers humming before sleep, the sound a low river moving through a landscape our headlines only visit when there's blood. The money follows in enough quantities to make Leandro stop making dig-your-own-grave jokes and start calculating acquisition offers. 2 arrive. One from a lifestyle conglomerate that wants to rebrand HushWing as a wellness platform with platinum tiers and a line of premium humming stones carved from ethically vague materials, and another from a private equity firm that thinks HushWing would make a nice, cheap attach-on to an airline catering business. Enzo reads both cover letters with the expression of someone presented with cakes made of frozen paint. He takes the pitch decks to the ethics board Amara insisted on, a small group who are paid enough to speak without flinching, who contain in their circle a midwife, a labor organizer, a pediatrician, a flight attendant, and an engineer who designs train horns. They demolish the offers with a tenderness Enzo will later recognize as a kind of love. "If we sell this to speed," the midwife says, "it will die of acceleration.